Hello. Hi, Randall. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. All right. There you go. Luke, your co-host now.
Thanks.
Yeah. Luke, what have you been doing? Have you been out with the bees?
We did. We checked on the bees earlier today. We ended up, so some of the boxes for Courtney's hives, which we're doing for just kind of finding out, I guess, what kind of different setups work best. I think we're doing 2 mediums in place of deeps. And then we're also doing some deeps and then also some Brummel boxes, which would be like just kind of horizontal hives. And unfortunately, when we installed the packages last week, or no, I think it was earlier this week, we lost a couple of queens. And so when we tried to install them, they weren't there. And so the packages didn't take. So earlier today, we ended up installing, or no, rather, we shook 3 packages of bees into, well, we shook the bees into packages from hives. And so they're sitting there with the queen at the bee lab, just getting kind of prepared for, I believe, Monday or Tuesday when we'll be installing them into the packages that they initially didn't take. Besides that, I was helping wax some frames earlier today for our honey supers. That way they were ready to go, and we got a lot done with that. And yeah, I've been doing that at home since it just seems like the bees take to the foundation just so much quicker with waxing the frames. It seems like if you don't wax the frames, they just kind of look at the foundation and don't really do much with it for quite a while until they're almost forced to. But when you, it seems like if you do pre-wax the frames to what's additionally already pre-waxed, it really does seem to help quite a bit to where they'll just start drawing it out right away.
That's great. It sounds like you guys have a lot that you're working on at UNO.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot. Luke is one of those special technicians that gets put on every project we have going on in the lab. So
like that.
he gets to be bounced around everywhere.
I feel like I'm learning a lot though. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It looks like we might have Dustin coming on soon here. But welcome everybody. Sorry about last time's Zoom bombing. That was just horrendously horrible, but we are password protected now, so we should be able to avoid some of that Zoom bombing incidences again. Again, if you've never been here before, we are Happy Hour Chat. Randall, Cass, and I wanted to just create an opportunity for beekeepers to ask questions and for us to get together informally and just to talk about bees. Since we're all on self-quarantine and in various isolation and just in need of just, you know, a little bit of human contact during social distancing. So virtually is as good as it gets right now, but it's great. And I know we had mix-ups last time, so I appreciate you guys all for sticking with us with that. And I guess today we are really lucky to get Randall. Cass is going to share some pictures and some information about what Iowa State's doing. And then we're going to just kind of open it up back to swarm questions and other things because there's a lot going on. Remember that we're on Zoom, so if you need to type in a question, you can do so at the chat box there, and Luke and Dustin and myself and Randall will be checking those and kind of making sure that people get their questions answered.
Judy, we do have a question in the chat. It says, why not use beeswax foundation instead of plastic? It says, my mentor only uses beeswax foundation. I guess for me personally, I do feel like the plastic foundation is easier to install, but I can understand where people might have a different preference.
Cool. I saw a note from Kat that I saw Kat sign on, so I just assumed that that was Dustin too. But hi, Kat. It looks like Kat's Dustin's still driving home with Willow, so he'll be along in a few minutes.
Judy,
Yeah.
do you have thoughts on wax foundation versus plastic?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a lot of people, it really is a preference. And some people really do like the beeswax foundation and just prefer that. It's just really a management style preference. We have always used the dark black foundation for the brood combs because it's easier for us to inspect eggs and young brood. And that's important for research purposes. But for our supers and just the honey collection stuff, we sometimes will use foundation, we'll use yellow plastic or use foundationless. It really is the brood comb that we really have a preference because of the research aspect and being able to see the brood. What about you, Randall? What do you use?
I have pretty much always used plastic foundation and usually the yellow stuff. So it's more just been, that's what I've always used and it works sort of thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I know that when I lived abroad, there were people that made a living, communities that in El Salvador who had bought like a wax stamper, which kind of looked like a big, when like you're making Italian food and you're making noodles, it kind of looked like a hand crank thing that you would run noodles through that would stamp the wax, and people would sell that. But yeah, I guess the ease of receiving plastic foundation, installing it, it's just what we've always done. But I mean, I would be open to using wax as well.
Yeah, and we've had some beekeepers that we've gone and visited, and they've gone foundationless, but what they do is modify it with a strip of foundation at the top and then bridge it with some popsicle sticks or some little skewer sticks down the middle of the frame, so sectioning it into thirds. And what they like to do is they've noticed that when the frame is sectioned in thirds, oftentimes the bees voluntarily create one of those sections into drone comb. And so they like to use that as just an easy system to cut out a section and use drone comb removal as just kind of, that's part of what they do in their comb production process. So they let the bees draw out foundationless, but of course, you know, I don't recommend any new beekeepers starting off to try foundationless because you really need those guides to build it straight. But what this beekeeper has done is created a system where he likes the foundationless or the wax foundation because he can cut it out and use that as drone comb removal. But it's not the foundation sheet, it's foundationless, just with the tiny starter strip.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, and it would be helpful too if someone was selling farmers markets or things like that. Sometimes it's kind of trendy or cool to have a square of like honey-filled comb in the middle of your jar, things like that you can't do if you're using foundation, plastic foundation.
Yeah, that's a chunk comb, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, I can do you want me to go ahead and get started? I threw together some photos. One project I've been working on here at Iowa State University here in Ames, at a farm outside of Ames, is I've been working on a new honey production apiary that we're putting together. So we're using some of the equipment that we already have. We're using some of our overwintered bees. And so to kind of show off to the dean, I threw together a slideshow that I thought I'd share it's just 10 slides. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about the process of us putting together this honey apiary. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I hope people can see that. Someone send me a message if you cannot.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, cool. All right. So So here we just have our truck. We have a lift gate on the back, which helps us, especially in the summertime when we have to move some heavy hives around. So it's pretty nice to have. But what I did was I went through our inventory of equipment in our bee barn and found suitable hive bodies and bottom boards and lids for us to wash and paint and repurpose for this project.
I'm really jealous of that lift.
It's so nice. Yeah, if you can get one, if you can get the university to get one, I highly recommend it. And the truck has an extra long bed.
Judy.
The truck has an extra long bed. I think we can fit 14 hives in there at once. So, which is nice. And that's if they're not small and we don't stack them. So.
Yeah. Hi, Dustin. Welcome.
So then went through, put primer on the hives, painted them with non-toxic outdoor paint. I did them white, and since ISU colors are white, red, and gold, or golden red, I thought that I would be incorporating some gold and red into the design. So I painted all the bottom boards and hive covers crimson red, which is our color, and then all of our honey supers that I'm going to be ordering next week, we're going to paint gold.
And so I noticed there, go back real quick. I noticed there you've got your tower of boxes.
Yeah.
So any new beekeepers out here, this is really good because when a few times when we started training technicians or undergrads, they would paint one box at a time. And we had to go and teach them how to stack them up in the tower and be a lot more efficient if you apply the paint. And then as they dry, to kind of separate them so that they dry properly. But it's much more efficient to like paint them in a stack than to paint
It's
them.
funny that you mention it. I tried the tower, but I ended up doing a lot of them individually, as this next video shows. Like, I think that's great. You're saying, you know, it's really good not to paint them individually. And then my next slide is literally just me painting them individually.
Gary Reader taught us that one.
It works for me. So, yeah, but it worked for everything I needed to get done. So that was good. Stacked the boxes. Then we had a branding iron. So, I'm sorry, I'm reading the chats. Okay. The one question: do you ever paint the parts of the supers that touch each other? Do you paint the parts of the supers that touch each other? We try to so where the box seams might meet each other, we try not to paint that. Of course, the bottom boards are going to be touching, but yeah. So I would say I'm not working on painting the insides or the seams, like the actual tops of the boxes, since I don't want them to all stick together, especially when they're dry. We have a branding iron. I don't know how well you can read that in this photo, but it says ISU Horticulture Station. So we branded our boxes. One issue that we've seen here in Ames a couple years ago, the USDA ARS team that does pollination and seed production had some of their hives stolen. And so since their hives got stolen, we know that rustling hives is something that could potentially happen. So being able to brand your boxes or put your mark on them in case they were to get stolen can be something to be helpful for identifying them later. Then we
there was a couple questions about the paint, and yeah, there was a comment that says that the paint allows the wood to kind of slow down in terms of its rotting. And then somebody mentioned that, Matthew and Sandy mentioned that you should probably seal the edge with something if you're not going to paint them, like linseed oil. I know that there are beekeepers that stain them instead of paint them. Dustin, do you know what they use?
I don't know what they use for a stain, but I know there's also beekeepers that have these giant vats, and it's like paraffin wax and resin that they put a couple hives in at a time, and they weight them down. and any moisture or anything in the wood comes out and the resin and the wax goes in, so they're preserved that way. But I don't know what they stain them with, if it's a normal stain or I know Marion would paint his colonies with like copper naphthenate, and you have to do that like 6 months in advance or the bees will abscond because it stinks so bad, and it's like highly toxic to humans. So
Yeah.
like you have to let it set for a while. But I think that's why we still have some of Marion's bottom boards and stuff, because he used copper naphthenate.
Wow.
Yeah, and then in that comment, there's another comment that says you particularly want to secure those corners where your hive tools scratch up the wood, and certainly when you see the wood starting to get soft, your hive tools just kind of go through it really easily. They just break apart.
Cool. All good. There's a lot of ways to do it. That's for sure. But you do want to. I used a primer because I felt like that would add another layer of defense to wood rotting or moisture getting in there.
Mm-hmm. Is there any particular brand that you would recommend?
I just bought. We don't have that big of a budget to put this together. So,
Is anything on sale?
yeah, I bought what was on sale, to be honest. So
Dustin, do you want to pipe in and say what you guys generally recommend, the types?
If I have my way, I really like Kills as a primer.
ooh.
I really, that's my go-to, at least.
But
like,
that has it has like fungicides and things in it, correct?
does it?
Yeah, that's what at least that's what the ones that I saw.
Maybe that's why I
tried to
lost all my
avoid ones
bees this
that had
year.
fungicide. Oh, sorry, what did you say?
So maybe that's why I lost 75% of my bees this year. No kidding. I've used Kills on my personal colonies for years, like just to prime the outside, and then I put I really like, at least my personal, like I try to do it at work too, because I'm not saying that because Judy's on here either. But like I really do, like painting is important. So if you can get a good layer or two of primer and then at least one or two good coats of paint on to make it last, because for me, honestly, like I hate, like painting boxes isn't my favorite thing to be doing. So if you can just take the time to do it right the first time, that way it lasts a lot longer and you're not having to do it every couple of years, then I mean that's the way I like to do it.
Yeah, I agree. We were in this situation, we were repainting boxes, but I still put in another layer of primer on there, and I did 3 coats of paint. So, all right. So then we just made a mess of outside the bee barn, and we took our hives that had overwintered and transferred them into these new hive bodies, and we set them up so that they also had resource frames in there with nectar and honey and some pollen that we either had stored from the previous year or used from the frames that were already inside the overwintered hives. We tried to utilize what they'd already collected this year. And then this is just this was just for the dean of the College of Ag, just to show him that bees are happy in their new home. These photos are from this morning, actually. It was a beautiful day here in Iowa, just a little bit windy. We had really blue skies. We loaded everything up in the truck. We put straps on them, loaded them up in the truck, and then brought them to the new site where we'll be keeping them. The next step is we're going to be building some hive stands, some nice looking hive stands, because this is not only going to be a honey production apiary, but it's also going to be a demonstration site. So the Horticulture Research Station, which is the farm where we have our apiaries, is it's also a tool for extension and education. So we invite people from the community in to learn different vegetable production methods. You can kind of see there's a bunch of posts in the back in that photo behind the truck. That's where they had hops production demonstrations going on.
There's a lot blooming too.
Yeah, and there's so much in bloom right now. There's a bunch of it's a horticulture farm, so there's a lot of apple trees, pear trees, a lot of things in bloom right now. So it's a pretty good spot.
So we have a question before you keep going.
Oh, this is the last photo.
Oh, okay. Okay, but before you go on to the next photo, what about that drift barrier right there? That's cool. Does that go and extend all the way across the back of the apiary?
Yeah. We try to find somewhere where there would be a windbreak on one side.
And what's on the other side?
It's really open. So the where the truck is facing, that side is very open. So we only have a windbreak really, I guess like on the bottom half and then a corner. So sometimes with the site you've got to kind of trial and error, right? So I do have concerns about wind at this site. It's also a little bit low, so hopefully flooding won't be an issue. Logistically, it's the perfect place. So
It's very flat. It's beautiful.
It's actually just the flat part of sort of it almost does a little dip. It almost makes a little valley. So I do have some concerns about it being colder or being a wind corridor, but it's if after having them there for a few weeks or during the summer, if we realize it's not the perfect spot, then we'll have the opportunity to move them too. But for now, this is their new home. Yeah. And that's the end of my presentation. Just to update people on what we're doing.
They're so pretty.
Yeah, the red lids really just kind of add a little extra zing to them, I think.
I was gonna say that too. They are great. I love that color.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. Yeah, I just got on. I just got home, so I wanted to jump on. I like your color. It's for Iowa State for Ames, right? Is that the?
Yeah, and I'm getting a lot of questions because we're crimson and gold.
Crimson and gold. Okay.
ISU extension is always red and white, but everyone's like, well, is that, Nebraska? Is that Ohio State? And so we're going to put gold colored honey supers on there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now, does anyone have any questions?
You do have some questions in the chat box.
All right.
Tony wanted to know, how do you accomplish long-term storage of honey and pollen frames?
We have a couple different places. We can store them in the bee barn, which in the winter isn't a problem because the winter stays really cool. So it ends up being okay. But also at the Horticulture Research Farm, since they do a lot of horticultural production, we are able to, they have some large storage rooms that are temperature controlled. So these storage rooms, they can usually make them cool rooms where they would store vegetables and things like apples or cabbages whenever they harvest them, because they provide a lot of food to dining services for the university. But then we could also heat up the rooms, I think, to about 95 at least degrees. So when we do want to harvest honey, that's something that we're considering, is making sort of a honey house inside.
And a little hot room, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
We saw quite a number of makeshift hot rooms or honey rooms. Recently, there was one from Scottsbluff, wasn't there?
What did they do?
It was like a converted closet with and Dustin, you're gonna have to fill in the details, but it was hooked up with modified lamps or heat lamps or something. Is that correct?
What are we talking about? Where was this?
We're talking about in Scottsbluff, the little hot closet.
It's not much different.
Oh, at Ernie's?
Yeah.
His hot room?
Yeah, it's a little modified closet with heat lamps.
Yeah, they were like kerosene lanterns almost, or kerosene heaters. So he would bring his honey supers in at an angle into his hot room, and he had these kerosene heaters that were like, their base was a wheel, like off of a truck. Like they were definitely like homemade.
I'm not recommending anybody do this.
But he would heat his honey up in there and then come out, and then he had 2 giant extractors for all of his stuff. And he had a couch.
It was nice though.
he had a couch on top of his office, and we joked that he would watch all of his workers from up there.
Okay.
It was crazy though. Like he had a lot of stuff.
It definitely makes it easier to extract when you're able to warm up those supers. So, because he had a really large honey house, so I can see how the advantage of, you know, having a small dedicated spot to heat up those supers would have helped make that extraction process faster.
To answer a few of the questions, does color coding each of the hives help the bees find their way to the hive? Can they see color and shapes? That's not something that I've done personally, but that's something that I've heard and research has shown is helpful. Different colored hives, different shapes above the entrances of your hives can help guide them. The thing about red, though, is that bees don't see red on the spectrum of light. So red is not a color that I would probably use to try to differentiate. But for example, whenever we place bee bowls out to catch bees in the field, we use like a neon bright blue, bright white, and bright neon yellow, because those tend to attract a lot of different pollinators. I don't know, what do you think about colors and shapes?
You can use like patterning, like stripes or you know, just unique shapes. People have also used landscaping as identifiers. So if you had like a pile of unique rocks or a distinctive feature in your landscape, like a fountain or a tree or a stump, sometimes the bees can orientate using natural features too. But yeah, there was a recent study with I want to say it's Keith Delaplane's group that looked at drift and the linear orientation versus circular orientation. And within the circular orientation, if the colonies were at different heights and had different patterns on it, they reduced drift by, do you remember what it was, 17% or something like that?
What I do remember is that drift was a lot higher on your average apiary than I expected.
Yeah, yes.
40%?
Yeah, it was pretty high.
Yeah. I don't remember how much the orientation and the shapes on the hives, how much that reduced it. Another question is, what are we using the bricks for? Is it to cover the top hole? No, we don't have top holes on our lids. We use either little feeder trays or we'll put like a medium on top and just put a little bag that we poke holes in that's full of sugar syrup. But we also do have the frame-sized feeder trays that we put in as well. The bricks are on top in case of wind, because sometimes with the migratory lids, they can get blown off, especially in times during the season when the bees haven't produced a lot of propolis to hold things down. So the bricks are just a little bit of helpful insurance to make sure our lids don't blow away.
Yeah, cool. I found that paper. Let me show them.
Yeah.
Can I?
Sure.
All right. I think I have the power to switch it. There we go. That's that paper we were talking about that came out with Keith Delaplane's group, I think last year, 2019. And that was just, actually that's a picture of our yard. but the arrangement was the linear A arrangement versus B, the circular arrangement with different colors, different heights, different symbols and colors. And they showed that we were able to reduce drift by from 25 to 7% or something like that. It's cool. It's these things that we talk about all the time, but no one's really put solid numbers to, right? I mean, I don't think anyone else has really looked at this kind of at a research level. Do you know, Randall?
With the colors and shapes? No, I haven't seen other research on that. So.
I mean, we recommend it all the time, but I don't know if anyone's actually kind of experimentally shown that.
Yeah.
Judy, do you happen to know, is there any recommended like shapes or symbols to use for orientating the bees to different hives?
That I don't know, but I do know there was this really interesting study where they were able to like take pictures of people's faces, and these were able to recognize people's faces if they were upright images, but if they were upside down, they weren't able to recognize an image as a threat. So they were like able to recognize human images, but in terms of patterns, I have no idea.
Okay.
And they always said that the attacker would always get stung, like they went for eyes. So they're able to recognize something about the orientation about your eyes and your nose.
So when you work your mean colonies, you got to do a handstand.
Yeah, go upside down.
Mark Welsh is wanting to share his picture of he's got some headless bee bodies. Are you able to share that pic, Mark?
And do a canning because I don't know.
Where's Mark?
Looks like he's sharing his screen.
Hi, Mark. Where are you?
I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and
Okay.
our hives are in the backyard. And just the last few days, I've been seeing headless bees being just left on top of our hives. We've got 2 regular hives and then a duplex. I did a 3-way split of my strongest hive several days ago, and all 3 of them have some of these on them.
Headless bees.
I
I
sent a
don't know,
message
guys.
to your lab and they suggested maybe a praying mantis or a bird maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking a bird maybe. There's certainly some sort of critters going after your bees. And these don't look like newly emerged bees either, because sometimes they can like remove heads off when they're pulling things out of, the cells. But this clearly doesn't look like, bees that were removed out of the cells.
Right.
I don't know, Randall, do you know any predatory head killing, head lopping bees?
In some of our weaker hives, we had large jumping spiders that were living under the lids. And I know that they prey on bees, but I don't think that they would. I think that it's more, bring it back into its nest, and they don't bite heads off, right? They suck the inside out. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it might
and
be something outside of the hive because they're just left on top of the hive, not inside on top, but I mean on top of the outer cover.
it is interesting that they would eat the head too, because if you were, I don't know, it seems like the abdomen would be a much juicier part.
Now,
Certainly
I'm guessing the brain of the animal is the most nutritious.
the hypopharyngeal glands, that's where they are.
So,
All the glandular secretions, yeah.
and hummingbirds have shown up at the opposite side of our house from where we keep the bees. And I don't know if hummingbirds do this sort of thing.
Yeah,
They're so small they probably couldn't eat the whole bee, but maybe the head of a bee is tasty to hummingbirds.
be interesting to see, you should maybe try to set up a critter cam outside your hive and see what's going on.
Is an idea.
There was a question about murder hornets, but certainly we are not in that region or in this facility to have to worry about murder hornets.
Does
they've only
UNL
been-
have any critter cams to check out? Lending library?
I don't know. Anybody have any critter cams that they know of? Also, see if you where are your hives? Are they in an area where you can just kind of sit out and have a nice picnic and nice long, sit and see if there's any birds that are out there?
Oh, my wife and I do that regularly on nice days. Absolutely. Nothing's more fun than to sit in your backyard and watch the bees come and go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, get some pictures. Is it a strong hive or a weak hive?
It's on all 3 boxes that we have. I've got a
And
strong,
just a few or a lot?
no, just a few. You know, when on the strong hive, I'm trying to remember now, which is maybe in a slightly windier spot, so maybe the bees have been blown off of it. There were 3 on the weaker, more protected hive, maybe 5 or so, and just a couple on our duplex.
Well, I'll certainly ask around. Maybe I can see if there are any other predatory insects that are out and about at this time. I don't think dragonflies are out right now. There was a comment about whether or not dragonflies would be out. And I don't know if, I think it's still too early for any of the hornets or any of the wasps because they're oftentimes take a while for them to build up. So we usually don't see them until later in the summer. So I don't think it's any of those. I think I'm guessing it's birds, but
That's my guess. Judy, we got a question in the chat. It says, Judy, has the Bee Lab looked at the economics of varroa-sensitive hygiene queens versus the cost of losses to mites and cost of treatment? So
Yeah.
using varroa-sensitive hygiene queens, their offspring for mite control versus treatment.
Is it worth the investment with the money you would save on treating for mites? I think is what they're asking.
yeah, and that's tricky because even when you purchase a varroa sensitive hygiene queen, you still have to incorporate some sort of varroa management. Whether or not you're treating or not, you still, that's only one aspect of that management scheme. So it's a little bit difficult to tease out the economic costs and benefits of that because it's an integrated pest management approach. So you're using multiple strategies, and that genetics and that breeding is just the preventative measures. But you still have to consider if there is an outbreak or if there are varroa mites being introduced by bees that are coming from your neighborhood colonies or colonies that are feral, or you can have the most hygienic queen that has ever been produced. That still is not going to protect that colony from mites because the mites can still come in from different sources. And so as the mites are coming in, those hygienic bees are mainly bred to maintain varroa within the cells as the brood is being infested. There's some traits that actually, like the ankle biters, the Purdue bees, they're being bred to actually attack the mites directly. But most of the hygienic traits are removing mite-infested broods. So you're still not addressing the mites that are coming in from the robbers or from other bees coming in. So that's just one aspect. You still have to kind of incorporate some sort of management, some sort of monitoring to control it. So it's difficult. There are economic models. There are certainly people who have kind of measured those, but they're very circumstantial. They're very scenario based. So like if you were a beekeeper doing this method, comparing A method to B method, these would be your economic pros and cons. But everybody does everything a little bit differently in the timing of that and the application timing and the frequency and things like that. I don't know, did that answer the question? Crew, anything to add?
I think like Judy said, like if you don't want to use chemicals, that's fine, but you have to do something, whether that's drone comb removal or brood breaks. You know, we all want to be beekeepers, not bee havers. So you have to do something for your mites. The varroa sensitive hygiene helps, but it's kind of like screen bottom board. Screen bottom boards only give you like a 10% mite drop. You have to do something else. And sadly, you know, you can control your own apiary, but like Judy was saying, like what if your neighbors aren't doing their mite controls properly and their hives die because of mites, and your bees find those colonies and then bring those mites back to your hive. It's we're all in this together, so we all need to do what we can to keep everything down and under control.
Hey, Barb's in the yard. Hi, Barb. I see her in a bee suit.
Okay, unmute. Sorry. I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
I'm about to sacrifice the all precious alcohol, which you can no longer find, to do a mite wash. Is there anything that anyone else has substituted for alcohol for mite washes? Because I'm not going to find more.
Yes. Oftentimes people will use the car washer fluid. So it's that blue window washer fluid. That will also suffice. We have also used, what's the other one? Detergent. What's the, can't remember what it's called. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can use. Alcohol, definitely. The dishwashing fluid or car washing fluid. You guys have that. What's the word for, what am I trying to say here? The blue
window washing
window
fluid.
washer. Thank you. Yes, window washing fluid. Yes. That will work just fine. And there's a question about whether or not that's the alcohol or the window washer fluid wash is more effective or less effective than the sugar roll. And there's a lot of people who kind of have looked at comparisons here, and oftentimes it depends on how you're doing it. The alcohol wash tends to be more accurate because you can more thoroughly shake that and really, really get them going and get really dislodge those mites off. And often the sugar roll test, you apply the powdered sugar and you let them sit. You really have to get those bees to agitate and really dislodge the mites themselves. And there's a little give and take there. Sometimes there's inaccuracies there. Or we found that if it's really humid out, sometimes the sugar cakes onto the bottom of the jars and some of the mites stick to that.
Yeah, I tend to, just me, but I tend to do an alcohol first thing in the spring and then when I'm getting a fall count, and I'll use powdered sugar in between. But I am now out of alcohol. To make
Yeah, so try that.
Or
The window
cheap
wash fluid.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going into your hive right now, Barb?
I just went into the one that was the one that I was concerned about some sunken brood in, and it looks like whatever it was that it caused it is cleared up. It's got a good pattern. I can go into my long hive, but I can if you want, as long as my phone doesn't die in the process.
Barb, is that the pictures that you sent us last week?
It was, yeah. It was really badly sunken, but I just saw it. The pattern in the brood that she's laid in the last week is great, and I just took a mite wash out of that one, so I'm hopeful that it was just cold weather and nothing else that
A little brood chill.
Yeah, had caused those really.
That's what we were thinking. She sent us pictures on the UNO Bee Lab Facebook page, and the cells were starting to sink in. She was really worried it was AFB, but it didn't. She tried the ropiness test and everything, and it didn't smell. It didn't rope. So I was thinking maybe it was a little bit of brood chill.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that that's what it is. But yeah, I will go over and see if I can get in the long hive. This is actually, it's a long hive that my cousin built for me. Technology is hard. There we go. And I wanted to try it because I wanted to use this hive primarily not for honey production, which, you know, it's a little harder to extract from deep frames, but for brood to do splits out of. So it's been pretty successful so far. But it's just basically 3 normal hive inner covers, 8 frame inner covers. And I got the plans out of the Beeculture magazine, or ABJ, I think 2 or 3 years ago, they had free plans.
Cool. Barb, we had a couple other comments in the chat box recommending cheap vodka, or
never waste vodka.
They also recommended the use of the head from a run of moonshine, which might be harder to get, but there's another option.
Sounds good.
It might depend on what part of the state you're in.
Right. All right.
And Everclear, of course.
Have to plug out because I think I'm going to lose battery. But Thanks, guys. I appreciate the suggestions.
Thank you.
That's your hive.
What?
Thanks for showing us your long
Yeah.
Yeah. Up on it.
Barb, we've got a grad student that's doing alternative hives this summer, and she's got a long hive kind of like that. So that'll be neat. It's neat seeing somebody else's with bees in it.
Yeah, stay tuned. We're trying to do a little bit more of the management type research. So looking at alternative hive sources and wait a minute, Dustin, what's your background? Is this Ghostbusters?
It's always Ghostbusters.
Is this the apartment?
Yeah, it's Dana's apartment.
Dana's apartment. I just got really distracted by the TV.
I'll just keep changing it every happy hour, and we'll see if we know what scene it's from.
Awesome. Judy and Dustin, I did notice a couple of questions we didn't get quite answered yet. One of them's from Arthur Manning. It says, any good results from using a fungus to fight mites? It says Metarrhizum nisopoli. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It says it's something I read about. Have you heard of anything like that?
Is that Steve Shepard's group?
Yeah, actually, there's a number of groups. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming up. I know. I feel like I just did a talk on newer research. There are a number of new biological control agents that they're looking into. Here we go.
While you're getting to that,
Yeah, sure.
I was reading a Shepard and Stamets article on beneficial fungi for viruses and how they assist with viruses. I haven't read anything about using fungi for mites though, so I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, so this is again, I was doing a talk about 2019 research, and it really does get a little overwhelming, all the research that comes in all the time. And so there was a couple of beekeepers that really asked for help to just kind of digest some of this, the literature that was coming up and just the rapid pace of this. So we did put together this little talk just to kind of highlight some of the stuff going on the last couple years. But just keep in mind that most of this stuff is still a work in progress. So it certainly don't, when I give this talk, I encourage beekeepers to don't go out and just put these things into their hives. They're still in various phases of testing. Many of them are still in laboratory testing. And so like this picture right here is of that predatory mite that they're testing to combat varroa. But this predatory mite tends to also be, is kind of a generalist. So here in picture A, it's chewing the legs off of a varroa mite. And in picture C, there's that mite with its legs chewed off. But in the middle picture is actually eating a honeybee egg. So that was kind of the importance of biological control research, is to make sure that what you put out in nature is going to kill what you want it to kill, but not everything else that you don't want it to kill. So that's kind of why this kind of research is really slow paced, and a lot of people get frustrated with it, but there is really cool stuff coming up. This one is that entomopathic fungi. And I don't know I don't remember which species this one is in this particular paper, but they're in laboratory testing here, and they're suggesting that the fungi could reduce varroa mite damage to the brood, not just by preventing the infection, but also by somehow improving their immunity or their response to kind of the pathogenic part of the varroa infection. So then there was another one, I think, 2 different types of Metarrhizum extracts. So these are fungal extracts. They're isolating these fungal, compounds, and then they're seeing how effective they are in treating for mites. And they did show that this one was as effective as fluvalinate, which is a common, common varroa treatment. But they're still, again, in these laboratory, very isolated scenario testing this, and they're suggesting that there's promise there, but they still have to do a lot more thorough testing. So this is that exact same isolate, but you can see how it's that fungal pathogen or fungal mycosis is what causes death, and that, you know, that's how it works. But you can see that the insect types are very broad. You've got beetles, you've got grasshoppers, you've got grubs. So again, this is one of those situations that we have to be very careful not to introduce something that is going to harm other things, not just what we want it to. And then that one, I think, is this really cool polypore mushroom research that is looking at how these extracts are impacting viruses. And so that's what Randall was talking about.
That's the one I saw. Yeah.
Viruses. Yeah. It's kind of cool stuff. It's hard to follow, though. It's hard to keep track. There's just a lot.
We've got Robert Burns from the Northeastern Kansas Beekeepers Association on. Hi, Robert. And he wanted to, he just made a note that the varroa-sensitive hygiene is a recessive trait in queens. So that's something also to keep in mind.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Robert, how many queens have you reared so far down there?
Oh, you know,
You're
I've
always
lost
ahead of
count.
us.
I've lost count. I have a batch hatching out tomorrow, and I really don't need them. I'm finding homes for them. I was just out working in the backyard today.
Well, you know, the danger of announcing that, you know, you're gonna start getting private chats about, well, I'll take her.
Far away, otherwise I'd help out.
Yeah, we had some questions about swarms, I think, right? Oh, thank you. Arthur submitted another publication, I think, regarding some of this biological control stuff. And then Mark, you mentioned a swarm. You got another swarm. A swarm in May is worth a load of hay. Is that true no matter how small it is? Well, how small is it? And are you sure if there's a queen in there?
Yes, that's the fun part of the story. The swarm actually came out of a tree that I've been watching. Somebody wants the hive out of the tree. It's a dead tree in their backyard. So I'm going to do a trap out later, but they called me yesterday and said, there's a whole bunch of bees outside. And I, as quickly as I could, went down there because I figured it's a swarm. I get up, I scrape off, and it's a small swarm. I scrape them off into a container. I move those into my hive, and I have 3 frames in this tub that I carry up 15 feet up in the air because it's a lot lighter than anything else that I can carry. So as I take each frame out, no queen, no queen, no queen. So I say, well, they were 2 or 3 deep on some of those frames. Maybe I just missed her. And as I'm cleaning up, a bee gets into my bonnet, into my veil. So I quickly take it off because I don't like bees an inch away from my nose and eyes. And I just toss it on the ground. I finish picking stuff up. The veil's the last thing that I pick up, so to pack away. So I pick it up and there's still a couple of bees inside. Well, the queen was one of those bees inside my veil. So I was trying to get my camera on my phone ready, but she was anxious to get out of that veil. So I said, all right, you win. So I get her on my finger. I put her right in front of the hive where all the other bees are already inside, fanning, trying to get other bees. I figured they're trying to get other bees to come to them, but they were trying to tell the queen where they were. So I just put my finger right in front of the entrance with the queen on it. And the queen just walked straight into that hive like she owned the place. It was wonderful. So I do know that I got the queen, but it's, you know, the bees would probably fit on 2 frames easily.
Yeah, I mean, you have other colonies at this time, right?
Yes.
So that's the beauty of having kind of the ability of time on your hand with you know, it's spring, so there's time to equalize and give that colony a little extra boost. So they're smaller, they're going to have a slower start in producing their brood production. You can give them a little extra boost if you have strong colonies that are perfectly, you know, progressing the way they should. and they can donate a frame of brood, a frame of sealed brood that's about to emerge, to give this colony a little extra boost in worker force, get them going.
I've been thinking of building I don't know what to call it, an excluder, a double queen excluder, and stack colonies on top of one another. So take my strong hive and then this new swarm, put them on top of one another. Of course, put a piece of paper in between them to start with, so that the upper colony benefits from the heat. And if there are any nurse bees that want to branch out and help out their neighbor above them, they could do that. I've read just a little bit about this, not a lot so far. So I thought I'd experiment with that.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can experiment with it. In the spring, there's a lot more time and flexibility for you to kind of donate frames and let that colony kind of get on its own. So there's opportunity for that little tiny dink colony to kind of progress on its own, and it may not if it's tethered to another colony. So that colony may remain small, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of the fun of these colonies, is you can kind of play with them, and they're pretty resilient to what we do with them.
You can put them on all foundation and feed them and just have them draw wax for you all summer.
Sure.
And store those combs away.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll watch Judy's reaction, because she doesn't know this yet. Judy, we split another colony today.
They are just so strong, man.
When we were shaking packages, we had another colony with like a dozen swarm cells. So shook them and split them.
Cool. Are you having the same issue, Randall, with really, really strong colonies?
All of our colonies are really strong, but right now we have one that we could split. And I haven't found any swarm cells. I haven't gone through it that well yet, but it's big. It's really booming. But other than that, most of them we've been able to manage. We had pretty high hive losses over winter. And that had to do with a lot of these being from experimental sites. We didn't treat them like a good beekeeper should, because we wanted to collect data.
Mm-hmm.
So at one of our overwintering sites, I think we lost we had 6 that survived out of, I think, 35. But at our other site, it was almost complete survival rate. So, and those that have survived are just booming. We haven't had to split yet, so that's good.
We've been battling swarming so much because of the COVID restrictions. We weren't able to go out and do a lot of the splits ourselves, and we even had to cancel package, because they were in Iowa. We couldn't drive to Iowa to pick them up. So then we ordered queens to do our splits, and then every day we had these swarms popping out of our yard. I think it's finally taken care of.
I was going to ask if you were ordering queens, or what you were doing for the queen situation on your split.
We ordered queens, and then we set up a queen bank, and so that gave us a little bit more time to distribute and equalize. And because of the cancellation of the packages, we had to reverse engineer packages through, and so that's how we kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone. We did our swarm management by robbing and taking all the worker force and recreating these 24 packages, and then supplying the queens with them. But I think we bought 30 queens because we anticipated some losses. Yeah, it's rough on the bees.
Yeah.
But I think it helped with the swarming. I think it controlled that a little bit.
Actually, now that I'm thinking back, on Tuesday we combined 3 hives, so maybe we have the opposite problem. We created our own little queen bank because we combined about 3 hives, and so we had 3 queens that we just made a little queen bank for the next couple weeks to see if we're going to need them. But
Do we have other questions? I'm sorry, I can't read the chat box. I lost it.
Ask if you've got images of swarm cells. I've got one.
Had a lot of swarming down in Kansas City too, they said. And then they're asking about swarm cells. If you have any images, there you go. Perfect.
Down there at the bottom, fully capped.
Isn't
that
that
from
a
today,
supersedure
Dustin?
cell?
That was not from today. That was, I think, in one of my colonies a couple years ago. I didn't take any pictures today.
Since that's in the middle of a frame, isn't that a supersedure cell, not a swarm cell?
Technically, yes, but it's going to look the same. Your swarm cells will just be at the bottom of the frame.
Sometimes they're making so many, they're everywhere. There's like a dozen off the side of the bottom, and there's some on the sides in the middle. And it sometimes when it's very obvious they're swarming, they put swarm cells everywhere.
Someone asked a question, Rachel asked a question, queen bank? What do we mean when we talk about a queen bank?
Oh, good question. We have pictures, don't we?
Let's see.
I don't know if I do. Let me look.
Oh.
Okay, so a queen bank, while they're looking for images, and I know we just showed it in the last field day training, is basically a queenless colony that has a lot of young nurse bees and old brood. So we make sure there's no eggs and young larvae, so that colony cannot produce their own queen. We make that colony queenless, and then we basically make that colony babysit all of our queens that are secured in their cages. And so we're basically creating a colony of retinue bees that will care for our queens that are in these little shipping cages or in these little, queen cages until we're ready to use them. Certainly you don't want to keep a queen bank for like a prolonged period of time, but it's a nice way to take care of your queens for maybe a week or so while you're trying to fix yard and equalize. And sometimes weather is poor, or sometimes you just need some flexibility in getting your logistics down. So that's why we create a queen bank, just to temporarily house our queens until we can get them in the hives.
You can keep refreshing them with a fresh frame of brood every now and then, right?
Yep, absolutely. So we usually don't keep our individual queens in the bank for a long time, but certainly we can keep our banks maintained through the summer. So if we're doing a lot of repetition of say you're doing queen rearing, or you're doing a lot of research and you need to have a queen bank throughout the season, you just weekly put in a fresh frame of sealed brood and replenish that nurse bee worker force every week. And you pull out the empty combs because once they're emerged, there's no queens to lay, so you just keep pulling that out. You just have to be very careful to prevent eggs from going into there, because if they start to rear a queen, or if a queen gets reared and is loose in the bank, those queens will pretty much will potentially die.
I'm sharing my screen just to show, we have a really cool insert frame where we can put a whole bunch of different caged queens that are in that specific type of wooden cage, which I think is really cool. So this was our queen bank, I guess a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. So, but whenever we have a whole lot of queens, that's what we use. So that's, just a hive body filled with a whole bunch of nurse bees, no eggs, and some queens in cages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also have a similar frame, but ours do not fit 2 queens. It's only one-sided. It's only narrow enough for 1 queen cage.
Yeah, this fits there's more space than we needed, for sure.
Yeah. It looks like it's pretty massive. Well, it's almost, it's time, and we were able to complete our episode without Zoom bombing, so yay, that is awesome. No technical issues either, so that's really big for us too. Next week we'll come back and we'll just talk some more and have some more photos. Again, if you have any recommendations for topics or questions that you want us to address, feel free to email it's on the listserv, right? We can either use, did you put up the, there we go. I'm reminding Randall.
Thank you. I forgot. Let me see if I can find.
Randall's gonna resend the email, the listserv, right? The email that we are sharing, so that we can kind of pass on ideas and images. If you come across like your headless bees again, or some other issues with some really strange sunken frames or diseases, please send us pictures so we can take a look at that. Maybe we can follow up before next Friday. All right.
I've got a quick question if you have time.
Sure.
How long can you keep, at what temperature, if it's 70 degrees, how long can you keep a frame of brood out of the hive without killing some of the larvae through chilled brood? And do older brood fare better than eggs, or do eggs, are they less susceptible to temperature changes?
Right. So certainly when we incubate a frame, it's pretty warm. I can't remember what degrees it is translated into Fahrenheit. Like
94,
Randall,
95, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's 90 something. Yeah. So what I recommend people is to not to expose young larvae to the environmental conditions, because usually it's not, sometimes it is the cold, but it also is the desiccation. And they can also, if you are lifting your frame straight up, they can be sensitive to that UV light too. So just be careful of overexposure to just, keeping your brood frames out, especially when they're young. I think they're a little bit more resilient when they're big or when they're pupal stages, but I think that it's better to be cautious. And certainly we don't usually recommend that you mess around with too many of those frames when they're at the egg stage or when they're really young. You check them, you look, and then you put them back. It's the same with queen cells too. You don't want to rock them or hit them. Randall, what do you think?
I think that's best practices. But then at the same time, I know that for some of our queen research, we did similar research that you've done in the past, where we caged a queen to the side of a empty drawn frame, and then counted the number of eggs that she laid. And in order to get an accurate count, I definitely had to shake a frame full of eggs. But then when we came back and checked 2 weeks later, or however many days later, we could see that, it turned into capped brood. So they were all still viable. But I do think it's a best practice to keep them out of the light as much as possible. Keep them in a warm place as much as possible. Don't bang them around too much.
And I think it also depends on how much food they have too, because if they don't have a lot of brood food to secure them, just that what is it? The water pressure, hydrogen bonds. I don't remember my chemistry. I'm just saying, if they don't have that goopy fluid to keep them in the bottom of the cell, I've seen it where we shake the frames and dry larvae kind of fall to the side. Yeah.
I've seen that too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Also,
good question. Keep them coming. We can talk all day and night, but we'll continue this conversation next week.
Also want to plug Nebraska Beekeepers' second Tuesday webinars is coming up next Tuesday at 7:30. And Judy, you want to talk about the topic for this week? Or this
Sure.
month?
Kristen Bailey is from the Center of Rural Affairs, and she is a beekeeper, or actually she's a newer beekeeper herself. She's probably been keeping bees maybe 2-3 years now. And so she's also kind of a small-time farmer. Her family has a farm. So she's gone through the process of finding and seeking financial support and funding for not only her farming business, but also her beekeeping adventures. And she has this connection with the Center of Rural Affairs. So we've asked her to come talk to beekeepers a little bit about maybe some of the resources that are available locally, either through her own experience or through her organization, because they work a lot with different communities. So I'm interested to hearing what she has to say too, because she's been working with farm services and their ELAT program, and then some of the farm loans, using some very innovative language to get farm loans for beekeeping. Yeah.
I want to attend that.
Well, please come.
Yeah.
All you have to do is keep an eye out for the posting on Facebook, right? I think we distribute the Zoom information
Yep,
on.
it looks like Patty's getting it up now. So if you like the Nebraska Beekeepers Association page, so you can just search for Nebraska Beekeepers Association on Facebook and like the page. We'll have an event just like the Hap-BEE Hour events on Facebook. Just go in there and the Zoom info and the password and everything will be in there. So that'll be next Tuesday, 7:30 p.m.
Well, thanks everybody
Okay.
for coming.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.